Hello, welcome to the first of this term's series of Mansfield Principal Talks. I'm very pleased to see you here, and I'm very pleased to welcome our first speaker of this term, Anne-Marie Imafidon, who is a bit of a prodigy, really, and has a degree in computer science, went into the business side of things, and then for the last 6 years, I think, has been running an organisation called STEMettes about getting women and girls involved in STEM. You may, if any of you saw the leaflet, it said that her talk was called Women in STEM or How to Stop Killer Robots. She then told me those were meant to have been alternatives, but it didn't matter because they're basically the same thing. So somehow she's going to explain both these things and why they're the same thing, and then after her talk she will take some questions and answers. So thank you very much, Anne-Marie.
Thank you. Yeah, it's one of those things, it's always about the framing of writing. So we will get to the killer robots eventually. So to kick off a little bit about me, so this is the obligatory baby photo of me there on the left-hand side outside my parents' house in Stratford. Any of you heard of Stratford before? East London, greatest place on earth. I'm about 4 years old in that photo. And from that age, I've really loved technology, loved technical things and understanding how things work. So age 4, one of my earliest memories is typing on my dad's computer, which he was using for medical research that he was doing at the time. And I, very importantly, went on to Word 3.0, if any of you remember that. Some of you don't know what I'm talking about. It was a really old version of Word. And typed the story of Little Red Riding Hood, but changed her hood from red to purple, because purple's a better colour. Saved it, and it was probably gibberish, because I was only 4 years old. Woke up the next morning, came back to my dad's computer, and my story was still there in the computer. It still fascinates me to this day that if you dubbed that PC out and you had enough patience to start it up, because life was tough back then, and you opened up the Word document that looked like gibberish, that would still be my version of purple, Little Purple Red Riding Hood. So for me, technology has always been about creativity and making things, but also solving problems. So you can kind of muse on what problem we solved there by changing the story of Little Red Riding Hood. But growing older and getting to university and studying maths and computer science at GCSE, at A-level and then at university, technology still was around creativity and solving problems. I actually studied at Keble. I made that decision when I was younger and foolish. If I knew more, maybe I'd have come to Mansfield. I read maths and computer science though, which last time I checked you don't offer here. So I'm going to keep that as my excuse for not having come to Mansfield. But really enjoyed the course, really enjoyed all that it had to offer, and enjoyed how theoretical it was, which I think now, the more I do, the more I work with technology firms, I think there's an assumption that computer science is all about the newfangled things and about building bots for our bots and apps for our apps, whereas actually technology is about this creativity, about looking at the basics of what we already know, we already have and have already created, and seeing how we can expand that. For me, what's most exciting about being in technology now is that so many of these things that we were playing with in the lab, that we were theorising on, that we were discovering, that we were looking into, have become reality, and actually have become quite impactful in their reality. So if we just look at the kind of commercial size of things, this is from a report a couple of years ago that McKinsey put out. You're not meant to read it, it's just kind of illustrative. The speed, scope and economic value at stake of 12 potentially economically disruptive technologies. We've got things like autonomous vehicles there to the bottom. Have any of you ever been in one of those? Yeah, no. So that's still coming, I guess, for a lot of you. Advanced robotics, the cloud, many of you will depend on many things. On the cloud actually for many things in your lives now. But there's so many things that we were looking at that were very theoretical that have become real. And so what's exciting in being a computer scientist, or at least in being in science, is that you're working on these things before they come real, before they come to fruition. And so it's quite an interesting, it's something that still fascinates me, something I'm still working on, and actually it's how I know the principal here at Mansfield. Helen and I were Future of Work commissioners only 2 years ago now, gosh, time flies, for Tom Watson, who's the Deputy Labour leader, looking at the fact that, we have all these things that we're working on theoretically, we have all these technologies, but actually they are potential, they're in their infancy, they're things that we're using now, but they have wider impacts than just that economic scale, than just what we've discovered technologically. And actually those theoretical things have not only become big business, but have big societal impacts, and actually now big problems now loom. Things like, how do we stop killer robots? With the Institute for the Future of Work, which I do want to give a little bit of a shout out, we've been looking at the problems that loom specifically around the workplace and in terms of work. We talk quite a lot now about robots coming to take our jobs. How many of you are worried about robots taking your jobs? How many of you are students? And so maybe you don't have jobs at the moment. But considering what might your job be if there are robots that are joining grad schemes and scoring higher on kind of the interview process than you are. But we need to talk about these things and think about them. It's not just about the technology and the innovation. It's actually about what can we use this technology to do and how can we solve problems that we actually have. But how do we empower the people that we have alive and that are living at the moment? And so we've come from this state of looking at science fiction. I don't know how many of you kind of love this genre, have like sci-fi films, for example, and that view of the future, flying cars, silver things. The future is very silver. I don't know if anyone's ever noticed that in kind of depictions that we have of it. But it's funny that we have this quote, the future's already here, it's just not evenly distributed. And this notion that actually a lot of science fiction has become science fact or even science reality. And so for me, what's another thing that I've ended up thinking about is who are the people? How do we have that science? Who is driving that technology? Which this illustration I absolutely love. When we think about scientists or we think about engineers or we think about princesses, I don't know who thinks about them in the same vein. Looking at this image, who sees a princess? Who sees an engineer? Who has no idea what they're looking at? We have this kind of confused view of, this science thing is happening, this technology is being built, but who are the people building it? Who is creating it? What are the stories that we have of STEM being science, technology, engineering, and maths, and who is driving that? Who has been creating it? Frustratingly, we seem to have this narrative that looks a little bit like this. So this is a real photo that I took covertly in a secondary school very near to me in Stratford. It's a girls' secondary school. And that's why it's slightly blurry, so I apologise for the kind of quality of the image. But this is a display that was up in the science department in this girls' secondary school in Stratford. And this was of great scientists, and I wasn't there when they put it together, I kind of just saw the final piece. Can anyone tell me something interesting about this image? Yes. They're all men. They're all, if I want to add to that answer, they're all dead white men. Which I think it's a funny one, especially being here at Oxford. It's something that I know we're kind of working on, but even being at Keble, you have this sense of kind of any building you walk into, you have dead white guys just looking down on you, watching you go about your day, with this assumption that that's all that was there before and that was all that came before. No offence to any dead white men that are here today, but that's not the whole picture of what went on. Science is incredibly collaborative. There are all different kinds of people who have done it. By not allowing women to be educated previously, we may have limited who was there, but that's not to say that you have to be dead white and male to be able to contribute in any of these fields. And that becomes pervasive. So, we all know the connection between the words Newton and Apple. We all know the connection between the words Archimedes and Bath. But there are countless other stories, countless other words that we should really be able to connect together that reflect the different types of people. For example, dead women, 4 of whom I have on this slide, because you could be dead and a woman and have contributed to our science reality that we have now. By a show of hands, who can name all 4 of these women? I tell you what, the lady's looking down in the second picture, so who can name 3 of these women? I'm feeling kind. Who can name 2 of these women? Okay, and just grasping at straws here. Can anyone name just 1 of these women? Okay, so right at the back there, who's your chosen one? It is Hedy Lamar. Round of applause for her. It's the first time in about a year of including her picture on this slide that someone's been able to confidently say, not just the H lady, or that she's an actress. Hedy Lamar, I'll say this for you, I'm sure you know. Many of you will have seen Betty Boop before. Any of you know the kind of cartoon character Betty Boop? That's who Hedy Lamar, she was modelled, in fact, on Hedy Lamar. She was one of the most beautiful actresses of her time. I know, looking at you all here, none of you will remember her from her heyday, but she was top of her game in Hollywood, and an actress, and then casually on the side was also an inventor who loved physics, because why not be both? Why not do both? And she actually co-invented something called frequency hopping spread spectrum technology, which in this room, some of you may know what that is. Hooray. For those of you that don't, where have you been? I'm joking. For those of you that don't, some of you, or most of you, will have heard or used something called Wi-Fi before. A couple of you, maybe even Bluetooth. So that's the technology that underpins that. Which, for me, it kind of speaks to this story of how many of you think, oh, thank Hedy every time you connect to the Wi-Fi. And Wi-Fi's become so important now, it's almost been added to the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So that's one lady that we have on there. Anyone that can name any of the other three who are all in black and white, just to confuse you? Yes?
Yeah, I'm sure I can. She's one of the hidden figures women.
She is. She is one of the hidden figures. She is Katherine Johnson, yes. So the third lady was a black computer at NASA. This was when computers were human beings, not robots. There's another job, there you go, that robots have taken over. And she did a lot of mathematics for NASA in the 60s, and was actually immortalised in the film Hidden Figures, which came out 2 years ago. There's actually a building named after her now at NASA, which, if you ask me, is a little bit late. Catherine's a little bit older than in that picture, and actually, I apologise, she's not dead. She's 100. She just turned 100, actually. So she's still with us, and she's fantastic. The other two. Greg. Marie Curie is eligible to be on this slide, but she's not on this slide. She is the one that we can kind of put alongside and kind of almost helps with this misnomer we have of women don't really do science apart from Marie Curie. So it almost seems like you have to be Marie Curie to have done it, which again, I'm alive, so I can't possibly be her. But again, so that's it. But we've got more on here. So Marie Curie is eligible, but isn't on here. I'll put you out of your misery because I know you're on the edge of your seats. So the lady on the left-hand side is Marie-Sophie Germain, who, if any of you are mathematicians or have ever studied string theory, she was very instrumental in that. She studied at a time when you, as a woman, couldn't apply to university and couldn't study, especially not maths, God forbid, a woman doing maths. And she so wrote under a male alias to her university. This was kind of 1700s, towards the end of 1700s. At the end of her course, she was like, surprise, I was a woman all along, ha ha ha, fooled you. But as a woman, that they then knew was a woman, was consequently left out of particular things for her day. So many of you will have heard of the Eiffel Tower, some of you may have even seen it. Next time you go, if that's something you want to do before the day comes, have a look around the kind of bottom rung, and you'll see the names of people, surnames, of scientists and mathematicians of Marie-Sophie's day, and they decided actually it was untoward to have a woman's name up alongside them, and so she was left off the kind of rungs of the Eiffel Tower. And the lady in the middle, if any of you have ever flown, you have her to thank for your safety. She was Katharina Paust, who's a German who invented the modern parachute. Which again, we don't thank Katharina every time. I don't know if any of you have gone for skydiving or anything like that. Katharina's the reason why you're able to listen to my voice today. So we have lots of examples of women who have been gone, are still here, and have contributed to that vision that we have of science, fiction that is now science reality. And I'm not saying even, I don't want anyone to say, I'm really saying women are going to come and solve all our problems and be the solution to many of them. I mean, they will help. But often it's not even necessary that you need to have women or different types of people involved. It's just to think about them as you're creating or as you're innovating. Inclusive innovation is truly great innovation. On this slide here, I've got 3 different examples. Top left is me at Bet, slightly different hair and a slightly different necklace. Stood next to someone. Can anyone tell me who I'm stood next to? Anyone recognise him? No. For me, this picture in the top left symbolises voice recognition, because that is in fact my mate John, the voice of Siri, up until version iOS 8. Many of you will have Siri, might have iPhones, they might have conversations with Siri all the time, so 9 times out of 10 it's John that you're talking to. It's nice to put a face to the name, maybe. Voice recognition technology, of course, now is very normal. So when I started STEMettes 6 years ago, we didn't have Alexa. We had ye olde Siri, which was rubbish. You'd say, hey Siri, give me direction to Mansfield College, and it would say, would you like ice cream? And you'd say, that's nothing like what I just said. No. But we've had that technology around for decades, and it's only recently that we've added to the data or had different types of voices that we've trained that on, that weren't just the voices of the engineers that developed that voice recognition technology. If any of you are Scottish or have a thick Scottish accent, looking around the room, a couple of you, she's nodding, she already knows what I'm going to say. They haven't quite got there yet with some accents, so Siri is particularly bad for understanding the Scottish accent. There's a great video on YouTube called Two Scots in a Voice-Activated Elevator. Spoiler alert, they go nowhere. There's a lot of 11 being shouted. So that's one example where you needed to be inclusive actually for the technology to take off to the point where now we talk to Alexa. Alexa does understand you because Alexa understands different languages and so can pick up accents. But it's something that we needed to be more inclusive in our innovation. The same goes for seatbelts and airbags, which again initially were created as a safety device. We kind of moved from horses to these motor vehicles that moved a little bit quicker. Kind of our way to kind of sit in them was different from how we sit on horses. And so teams of engineers were tasked with keeping us safe whilst moving in motor vehicles. What they then did, duly, was they kind of took average measurements, average height, average build of people, and built seatbelts and airbags. Trouble is, what is average? Who is average? If you're a group of white men, your average is different from a group of white women, is different from a group of black children. All averages are different, so average is always relative. And so if you forget that and you build seatbelts and airbags for the average male, what then happened with some early teams of engineers was that they killed women and children, which was not the point of the innovation or the invention that they were working on. Final example, and I've got an old image. I need to find a newer image actually to put and to show, but final example is a couple of years ago, a major phone retailer came out with a new element of their software, and this was repeated again 2 years ago, so a different company but the same story, and this software helped you track your health, everything to do with your health, from your sleep to your steps to everything that you can think of, apart from something that's a big part of health for a large proportion of half of the population, which is their monthly menstruation cycle, which some of you here may have heard of before, some of you may know, some of you may have even experienced it, but this entire company saw fit that wasn't a part of the picture of health, and so didn't include it. And so everyone laughed at them, and that was fine when they did it a couple of years ago, and then they had to kind of rush to bring it out as part of this big innovation that, yes, women can use our app too to track their health. Last year, a different company that has a tracking device that did the same thing around health also decided to say, yes, we are here for the women, you can measure and track your cycle using our app. And what they did was they limited the length of your period to 10 days, which if any of you are a woman or have ever met a woman, you'll know that periods don't adhere to regularity and they don't follow our rules. And if you're a tech company, you probably should have had a couple of women that you could have talked to help you guide on that innovation. So it's very important that we talk to different people, we're inclusive when we're building things. And so for me, personally, this has meant ensuring that we have different types of people that have great formative experiences with technology to feel like they can be in those rooms, they can be a part of building and creating, being collaborative, being altruistic and solving those problems. So I currently run a social enterprise that I set up called STEMettes. We work with girls from as young as 5 years old all the way up to 21. I can see a couple of you in the audience today. And we expose them to the world of STEM, all that is possible, and the creativity and the altruism involved. Because often enough when we talk about technology, we're talking about doing things harder, faster, stronger, better, and we're not talking about the fact that this is about problem solving. It is about writing Little Red Riding Hood and saving it in the computer and having other people being able to get back to it. But it's also about solving problems for people using technology. And so what we do is we tell the girls these stories, we get them to meet people who are alive as well, which is kind of important, people that are here now innovating and creating, so they can see you don't have to be in the black and white life to have been able to contribute and to add to science. But we do something for them in their formative years that helps to change that and help them move along with their technology. And what's fantastic, or what's been lovely and what's been interesting to note, is that the girls take to this creativity and this altruism even when we don't point them towards it. So back in 2015, we ran a tech incubator for teenage girls. We had 115 girls from across Europe, aged between 11 and 22, in one massive house in South London, 45 at a time. It sounds as crazy as it was. For 6 weeks, 24/7, we were there with teenage girls who ate more food than you can imagine that number of girls would eat, read more One Direction fan fiction than I can appreciate. But we also ran them lots of sessions on technology, on building business, on creating organisations, on solving problems, and solving problems that that they surfaced. But also in what it is to legally what you should have for a business. We ran this as a real tech incubator, and halfway through we got in a venture capitalist, we got in a couple of funders, and we said to the girls, whatever ideas you've got at the moment, we'd like you to pitch them. We've got real money, real cash, up to 30 grand worth of cash for you to take down for your company. We're going to take you seriously as young innovators. And these are the logos of the 29 startups that came out of Demo Day. You can't tell by looking because they're just logos. But these were all STEM companies that we then noticed had an altruistic end. Which I don't know how many of you, if I told you, you've got to build a company, I'm going to give you £30,000, how many of you would say, I'm going to go and solve that problem in an altruistic way? And that would be the main aim of what you end up doing. It was fascinating to see. You have things like PurchaseMate, which allowed you to scan the barcodes of products in the supermarket, and you could see how many miles that product had travelled to be where you were. We had things like Free Feet, which if you have Parkinson's, is a device that you attach to your shoe to reduce gate freezing as you're walking. We had TalentWorks, which was a recruitment platform for highly functioning autistic people. And we had all these different things that came out, and not a single one of them was just money, 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 profit, 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 creating problems rather than solving problems. Every single one was altruistic, which was a fascinating thing. It wasn't something we drove, it wasn't something that we said. That was something that the girls almost entirely gravitated to. And so then it makes me wonder, and it makes me think about, how do we stop these killer robots? What is the technology that we have now? What is is going to be on that report that McKinsey writes today, that is coming up in the next couple of years or the next couple of decades? Technology that we're still learning how it works, or maybe we could be better at the innovation on it, and which technology looks like it's going to end up enabling some of those killer robots. So in the couple of minutes I had left, I don't have a timer. Do we know how long I've got left? In the couple of minutes I had left, I wanted to talk you through a couple of technologies and show how actually killer robots is not inevitable. It's something that might happen if we continue to solve the wrong problems and ask the wrong people the wrong questions to get the wrong answers. But it's not inevitable. This technology is not innately harmful. Maybe the people making it are, but more on that shortly. So the first bit of technology I want to talk about is the one that is making all the headlines that people are most worried about, which is artificial intelligence. This is a video from a company called DeepMind, who are now part of Google. And artificial intelligence, which is, it's an interesting definition that we have on it, but if you think of the intelligence of human beings, this is something that's not a human being making the same kind of decisions independently of human control. So this is an algorithm that has been written that learns and then acts on what it's learnt. If any of you ever had a BlackBerry, you'll recognise the image that I had, which was Brick Breaker. I'm sure you have many happy hours or minutes spent on Brick Breaker, similar to Pong, kind of from the early days, where you have this bar at the bottom that moves along, and you have that pixel that is the ball that bounces. And so they train this algorithm, and they said to the algorithm, we want you to have a look at the ball, we're going to give you control of the bar, and you want to maximise the score you have at the top. So they didn't give it the rules, they didn't tell it any more than you might have known, having seen Pong or played Brick Breaker before. They just said, control the bar at the bottom, view the score at the top, go figure. And so they set this algorithm to play, and so it played 100 times. And after 100 times, we can see the score is about 300 plus, and it's kind of getting better. And so it's okay at playing the game. After 200 episodes, we see that it's getting even better. And the thing to note, or the thing to remember with artificial intelligence is, many of you will have played the Brick Breaker game 200 times. Anyone here who reckons they played it about 200 times? Maybe more? There you go, a lot of students here. Maybe there's a new game that you're playing instead. It played those 200 games consecutively. So how many of you ate or slept or went to work in between playing games? Played it 200 times, a couple of you, there you go. So this robot had that on you, where it didn't take any breaks. This is after 400 goes, we can see that the score's getting higher, it's doing slightly better, kind of being more reactive, following the ball and doing what it can. But after 600 times of playing this game consecutively, it learns the strategy, which I hope I haven't spoiled anything for anyone who's still trying to get their Brick Breaker game score up. It learns that if you tunnel along both sides and allow the ball to bounce at the top, then you can maximise your score without doing much work. How many of you worked that out? Okay. So any of you that didn't, the Brick Breaker algorithm is going to come and take your job. Only joking. You don't work playing Brick Breaker. Thankfully, this is just a game. It's not. No one, as far as we know, is employed to play Brick Breaker. So you don't need to be worried about that per se. But it is an example of where we're using technology and where technology can do some cool things or do some interesting things that may lead us to killer robots, but could lead us down another path or somewhere else. I want to play this video very quickly. So this is an orchestra celebrating National Day, I think for Luxembourg a couple of years ago. Are any of you musical? Do any of you recognise the piece? Kind of thinking faces now going on. Is it Beethoven? Is it Mozart? Anyone want to hazard a guess? It's not the first piece written by an AI, but there you go. You get the theme of where I'm going with this. So that piece of music was written by an AI called Ava, whose name you can see there in the top left-hand corner. Ava stands for Artificial Intelligence Virtual Assistant. And this is a piece of software owned by a couple of composers, actually, who fed in lots of pieces of music historically to say this is what music people like, this music is upbeat, this music is downbeat, this music is solemn, this music is celebratory. And so this algorithm then creates a piece of music, and then you've got human beings playing it back as if it was real. Who would have been fooled? Who had Beethoven on the tip of their tongue? Haha, I'm joking. So this algorithm, that wasn't the first piece of music that you've heard from Ava. So Hollywood studios are using Ava to score films. We're using Ava in the background of games as well. This is already here. This is something that's already happening. I'm sure someone's going to ask the question, does this mean that musicians are going to be out of a job? Well, you've got to think about it this way. Ava didn't come up with music. Ava didn't invent music. Ava had to use music that had been created by humans to know what worked well. Ava isn't playing the music, although of course we know that technology is able to create music. But what I think most importantly to remember is that this music is being played for human beings. So I don't know that we're ever going to get to the point where algorithms are making music for other algorithms. So if nothing else, we're going to always be here to enjoy the music, which I think is a nice thought to keep with us. But it's funny to think of that technology being able to do that. The nice thing about technology, though, is that it's not in buckets, right? So a lot of these things interweave, and like we said, it's collaborative. If any of you study maths, you'll know any theorem that you're proving, you have to use other theorems that people have made to kind of come together. And it's the same for technology. And there are so many technologies we have that we still don't really know what we're using them for. So this is another one.
Oh my goodness.
This is a reporter. And you can see now, I don't know if you can tell, he's on the left-hand side, he's at the top of the shard on this virtual reality slide.
So this is abusive. I think you need to get, honestly.
So there we go, so I'll pause it there. So he's on this virtual reality slide, terrified of going down a slide that is kind of simulating where he actually is, which I think is a weird way to use the technology. You could have had him here and had him be transported to the shard, but instead they took him to the top of the shard to be transported. But anyway, so we've had that technology, and it's very real, and you can see that's a real response, that's a real reaction to that virtual reality. How many of you have tried virtual reality before? There we go. It's very good, very realistic in so many different ways. Even more so when you've got audio. And very interestingly, when you've got audio on your virtual reality, then all of your senses are completely devoted to that virtual reality. And there's very little other types of consumption that we have that are kind of just one track. When you're reading a book, you still have other audio coming in. When you're watching TV, you can still see things going on around it. Whereas with virtual reality, there is something about the oneness, kind of a certain focus in technology that you're using. Like I say, I question whether that's a good use of that piece of technology, specifically with the shard example. But it's not just about technology for bad. So I always like to include this one as well because I just think it's handy. If any of you have ever got a parking ticket, which maybe in Oxford is less. In fact, no, I've got tickets in Oxford before. Do not pay is another extension of this kind of technology. So not quite the virtual reality, but the artificial intelligence, where someone was frustrated because they kept getting parking tickets. And this is a fun one for any lawyers that are here who may be wondering about robots taking their jobs. You put in the reference code from your ticket, you put in the area that your ticket was given to you, you answer a few questions, and then you print and you post the letter that comes out. I think you might have to sign it, it's probably the only interaction, which I guess is a good, it's nice that that's a barrier there before you send it off. But again, we're seeing these robots kind of here, solving problems, doing things, and advancing. And so what do you do? There's one more, here we go. One more that I want to talk about, which is the Internet of Things. It's another trend, which some of you may be familiar with. If you're not, you'll have heard of all these smart things. You might have a smart home. Who here can control their heating from their phone? There we go, the jingle, I can't remember how it goes. With Hive, you control your phone from your home. No, your home from your phone. There we go. Internet of Things, where it's smart. I have a friend that has a house that tweets. It's a cottage on the Isle of Wight, so there's a mouse trap, because cottages have mice, I guess, in the attic, and it's connected to a sensor, so when a mouse is caught, a message goes out via the house's Twitter account to say a mouse has been caught in the east side of the attic. Which you all laugh, but that was before Hive, so now we have the same system. We have smart cars, we have all kinds of different smart things that are on the internet that communicate without human beings being a part of that interaction, which is why we call it the Internet of Things. So there's so many different technologies, so many different things that we have coming. And so the question is, in fact, the question is, just because we can build it, does that mean that we should? And who is building these things? I want to go back to my example of the seatbelts and the airbags, where those engineers were doing the best they could. They meant no harm, meant no evil, and yet inadvertently built something that sadly lives were lost. We're still building, we're still innovating, we're still creating. I do have a very, very real worry. I know we've had autonomous vehicles already kill people by knocking them over, but I'm pretty sure there's another part of the technology that might have been overlooked in all the data models that we have and in everything else, where these are going to end up being inadvertent killer robots. And so what we have to do is make sure that we don't repeat those history problems. We make sure we've got this balanced history, but also telling of what an engineer looks like. There's a great Tumblr called All Male Panels that you may have heard of. Which is great, that's hours of fun there. I want to point to the left-hand side though, which kind of continues, and it for me is kind of the heart of this problem. This is almost how we stop killer robots. So this person on the left-hand side, a couple of years ago there was the Rosetta mission at the European Space Agency, something to do with Mars, yada yada yada. It was a big news item because we love space. As human beings, it's this thing that we're kind of excited to explore, and so it was all over the TV channels, all over the news, it was everywhere, and this was the person that turned up to represent the European Space Agency. Now some of you can't tell or can't see it from where you are, but there are naked people or partially naked people in this person's shirt, which for me is a very interesting situation. It's one of those things, there's this meme on the internet, how did we get here? Record scratch. How did we get to the point where this is an okay thing? So it's all right for this person to wear out of the house. It's all right for this person to wear to work. Not only for them to wear to work, but to wear to represent work outside of the building. Not only to represent work outside of the building, but represent work outside of the building on national television on one of the biggest days. And the cameraman didn't say it, the PR handler didn't say it. No one said, there's another shirt that you might want to wear today, right? And so we've got this caption, no, women are totally welcome in our community, just ask the dude in the shirt. And so we've got to think, who else are we missing out on? Who is building these technologies? Who is deciding what they should be? Who is comfortable to be in these spaces and be innovating and creating in these spaces? And who's not comfortable? Why aren't they comfortable? Now, I don't know about you, I don't have to be a woman to not want to work alongside that person and have to look at that shirt every day. There's something about it that just unsettles me. I can't quite tell what. So it's something that we do have to think about, especially given the fact that this technology doesn't build itself, doesn't really have intentions of its own, and we do still have these unintended consequences, which, there's the adage that if you don't intentionally include, you unintentionally exclude. This is an example, you can all see it in the room, but I won't say it for the sake of the podcast, of another technology which is hitting the headlines at the moment because the police are using facial recognition technology for policing and for crime prevention. And we've got this algorithm here that can see an image and tell you it's a skyscraper, can see an image, tell you it's an airplane. Yes, that is a car. Yes, that is a bike. No, those are not gorillas. And yes, that is a graduation. And this was a real product that was released out, and we only noticed this when it went out into the real world and different types of people were using the software. And so it had to be recalled, they had to update it, but why did we have to get to that point before we asked our questions or before we had different people that were in the room? I'm pretty sure if I was on that team, I wouldn't have appreciated having that tagging system on my pictures. I don't have to be there though, because I can only be in one place at one time. Another example is this. So this was a security robot used in Silicon Valley in San Francisco that they had kind of patrolling, almost like a Roomba, kind of patrolling outside particular buildings, taking images of people for security purposes and following them around. What it then turned out that kind of a couple of people read into was that it was effectively documenting the homeless people that they had around San Francisco, which again was an unintended consequences of what it was. But again, who did we have thinking through how do we use this robot? How do we use this technology? Do we need, is that, if you could build any robot, is that the robot that you needed to build? One to do security for us around the building and take images of everyone that is passing by around the outside. And so, to go back to my initial question, this is Terminator. Science fiction, of course, that is almost science reality, actually. Close enough, but not quite there. I don't want anyone to have any nightmares. How do we stop killer robots? Well, given technology doesn't build itself, nor does it have any intentions of its own, none of those algorithms asked to be written. Ava didn't want to be a composer. It's only those are the people that are creating technology and the people that are behind the problems that we're trying to solve that we're able to ensure that the creative killer robots has better projects to work on. We need to give them better ways to express their creativity and a better sense of altruism for what should be built. So how do you stop a killer robot? Well, either you just don't build it in the first place, but my computer science answer is to reverse its logic for killing in the first place. And I'll end on that note. Thank you very much. Sure.
Well, I was going to rescue it, but in the meantime, that's quite good because it means I don't talk too much. Thank you very much, Anne-Marie, for a very interesting talk. Oh, look, I've got another one. I'm back. I think it's very interesting, and I think the work you're doing, educating people and getting a wide range of people interested in the technologies is a fantastic first step. I'm also interested in whether you think the ethics of this are something that should be taught, because I think the people who get these jobs are the ones with the great ways through solving problems. And I'm just wondering, in the way that a doctor has a Hippocratic oath or a lawyer has a set of rules, whether we as a society should be thinking of what rules we want people to have to think about and have to learn when they set off on this sort of training.
We definitely should, and I think the important word in your question is we as a society, or important phrasing is we as a society. So I think it's something that now that I'm older, now that I've worked, now that I've been in different rooms, it's something I'm called on to comment on. But why, what qualifies me to be the person that says that this is the line that we should draw things at? What qualifies me to say this is okay and that's not okay? I've always said that it's something a little bit like how we talk about immigration, where you don't need to be an immigration lawyer to be able to have a conversation about it, but also have a view and express a view. It's the same. You shouldn't have to be a technologist to be able to comment on whether it's okay for an algorithm to make that decision over your life, or for a robot to perform a particular role. So I think ethics is very important. All of us being able to be a part of that conversation is imperative. But even more so when we're teaching technology and teaching computer science and teaching science in particular, we need to definitely talk about the ethics, so that if it is something that you end up doing later on in life, it doesn't become this surprise that all of a sudden you have to fill an ethics review every time you want to do a particular experiment, which is part and parcel of being a scientist. But again, that shouldn't be something that you only learn when you become a professional. It should be something we're constantly asking ourselves: is this the right question? We're going to do this investigation. Have we got the right hypothesis at the beginning? I'm pre-reading or previewing a book at the moment called The Gendered Brain, and it's kind of has parallels with another book by Angela Saini called Inferior, that talks about the fact that when you had early neurologists looking at the size of the brain and the weight of the brain and studying the brain, they were doing that not for studying the brain's sake. The impetus for them was, we want to prove that women are less than men. And so we have this interesting thing where they do all these experiments and they make all these measurements, and every time the measurements put the women slightly above the men, they'd be like, oh yeah, but we're not sure about that result, so actually we'll kind of keep that study to the side. And so again, we have to think, if you had different people there asking that question, how much further could we have got in neuroscience? How much further could we got in other aspects of STEM? Just having different people asking different questions, you might end up doing the same experiment, but then you're more open to the conclusions and the results of what's coming out. So the ethics are important, but having different types of people, having a wider conversation is also important.
Okay, different types of people asking questions, not just me. I'm going to open it out. Who's going to start off? There's a young woman at the back there.
I was just wondering what you thought the role was for people who aren't involved in STEM really at all, but feel strongly about it, and how they can help.
So there's a lot of things that you can do. I'd say even if you're not in STEM strongly, you're still alive in 2019. You can't move, and your clothes were engineered. Everything is there. You eat STEM all the time. So I think embrace it. It's not a sole identity. You don't have to have been locked in your room for 2 years trying to solve a maths problem to be a STEM person. So embrace it. I'm sure there's elements of STEM in a lot of what you do. But there's lots in terms of debates, there's lots in terms of policy work, there's lots in terms of research. And there's a growing argument actually for having sociologists working alongside technologists, rather than them just working on their own, but people studying the effects of technology and the kind of the same way as you'd study anything else, really, kind of looking at on writing for technology. So there's always kind of parallels between STEM and whatever other field you might be in. Even something like science fiction. So I was recently involved in a project getting female science fiction writers kind of together into an anthology for them to write something, which again, you wouldn't necessarily think is STEMmy. But given that so much of what we've created now has come from people writing it in science fiction, I know there's a certain billionaire who's trying to bore a hole into the middle of the earth, who has tried to create almost everything he's read in science fiction. So there's all kinds of ways that you can do it. I'd also advocate at this point for STEAM beyond STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, arts and maths, which is actually where we're kind of moving towards, getting people to be multidisciplinary, but also appreciating that good design, good expression, and kind of it's all creativity, so it's all within the same spectrum. So allowing people to find their place within STEAM is another thing that's quite important. So I'd say don't write yourself off. You definitely are a STEM person, if not deep down, then slightly higher up.
Helen.
Oh, thanks for your talk. It was
Hang on, this is a microphone coming.
Microphone coming to you.
should say this is Helen Margetts from the Turing Institute, who does
It's
a lot of stuff
fantastic.
about ethics and AI.
Yay.
Well, also my job title at Oxford is Professor of Society and the Internet, and I'm very confident that my job won't be taken by robots. We'll always need somebody to study what they're doing. But at the moment I am working on this program at the Turing, which is to do exactly what you just, it's to try and use AI and data science to make government better. And more generally apply it to public good purposes. But something else we're trying to do is to do another thing that you were talking about, which was to get more women into data science and AI, obviously starting with the Turing, because it's not a very impressive record on that score. Would you have any we're just starting a research program focusing on kind of how do you get more women to enter the field, and then how do you keep them once they're there, because retention and the kind of cultural barriers that we hear reported in the press quite often is a really major issue. Would you have any recommendations for us, just kicking that program off?
Lots. So attraction and retention, retention and promotion are kind of the three things that you need to kind of make sure you boost your numbers correctly. In terms of attraction, I can't speak enough for creativity and altruism. I think especially when we talk about AI and data science, often there's this need to kind of focus on the numbers and focus on the technical end of what we're doing, rather than focusing on the fact that we're solving quite big problems and you're going to be able to change people's lives and help people along, and keeping that at the core of your messaging, at the core of your job descriptions, at the core of how you run and what you do, which women tend to then feel like that's something that there's a noble aim that they want to be a part of and they want to contribute to, not just another tech company that's going to shift elections or whatever else it might be. The other thing to do in terms of retention, there's a lot around kind of culture, and I kind of hit on it a little bit with the guy in the shirt, but just looking at what is your culture? Who do you have in your organisation? What is their behaviour? What are we tolerating from them? And what should we not be tolerating? What behaviours are rewarding and what behaviours are we not rewarding? So we tend to see, especially in academic settings, that tenure makes people untouchable in a way that means that if you're a more junior person trying to do anything within that person's jurisdiction, you're very restricted. So even if they do some unspeakable things, you're not able to report them without the repercussions for you being too great. So that's, I don't know if you catch my drift on that. So I think looking at your processes and looking at who you have in your organisation and how you hold them accountable, but also what you reward them for, is very important in terms of retention. And then finally, promotion. So any women that you have or any people that you have coming in, it's really important for them to see themselves reflected in your senior levels. I mean, we had this conversation just before we came in terms of, who do you have in your advisory board? Who do you have in your leadership? Who do you have senior in your organisation? Can someone like me succeed in this organisation? Is that clear? I don't want you to just say it when we have team meetings. I kind of need the actions, need to see that that's something that's happening, which again, it's quite easy to talk the talk, but are you walking the walk? And if you do that, good news travels fast. The women, women know other women, they go and call them, and before you know it, you've got a balanced team. Or you've got the opposite problem, which is that you have too many women there, which, as things stand, is a good problem, good position to be in.
Yes, up at the back there, Stephen.
Thank you very much for your talk. I guess a big problem with AI is it's very data hungry.
Mm-hmm.
So to do this training, as you explained, you have to feed the computers enormous amounts of information. And so people who work in AI companies are frequently scrabbling around to try and get as much data to do as much training as possible. The example you showed with the image tagging, where clearly what must have happened, I don't think it was primarily an ethical problem. The programmers had just fed lots of pictures of people and objects, and of course unconsciously what they'd done is fed the computer huge numbers of pictures of white Caucasians, so it was brilliant at recognizing white Caucasians, but if people had a different face, it did something horrible. So you've always got this tension between probably in AI companies, people scrabbling around for data, but not paying enough attention to whether that data that's being put in is representative. And I guess AI algorithms are always going to be looking for the most efficient solution, as you showed with the table tennis game, of getting to a result. And so there's always that possibility of reversion to the mean. So how can we get AI companies to be thinking more, more creatively, getting data which is more representative, more diverse, when there's that pressure on them to be pushing as much data in there as possible?
I think you need to talk to this lady, firstly. But I think secondly, I question you a little bit. I think that is an ethical problem. If you're scrabbling for data and you end up having largely skewed or very biased sets of data, it's an ethical problem for you, because then your algorithm hasn't been trained correctly. And so is that something you should be releasing, that should be making decisions if you haven't given it the right sets of data? I think that is an ethical issue. That is a problem. It's as simple as that. Do you have to have this product come all the way out before? Is it an ethical problem then? Is it an economic problem? Is it a reputational problem? Then it grows into something else. I think, unfortunately, at the moment, it's one of those things where people have to be shamed into doing things correctly and doing things properly, rather than just doing them properly to start off with. With the Institute for the Future of Work, actually, we're talking about, if not setting standards, legislating for where you should be getting your data, tests that you can do on your data before it's allowed to be used for at least public service. But I think it's something that we do need to have teeth in whatever legislation or whatever solution is that we come up with. There's also this notion that we need to actually get technology companies to see us, the data points or the users, as participants. So rather than it being us and them, we need to actually level things out and say the people that are going to use it and the data points that we have are just as important as us, the people that are creating it. And at the moment, it seems to be this kind of, we're superior to you because we know all the technology, which doesn't work when you do end up moving elections or any of the other kind of stuff. I read something actually earlier today from the Harvard Business Review about the fact that we are probably looking at having a bit of a reversal where now we go to top-down algorithms rather than machine learning algorithms. So saying that actually we want less data, we want to train our algorithms on less data, and give them better kind of logical rules at the top. So a bit like do not pay, where that's come from a legal system, which thankfully the legal system is mostly codified. I guess it's more complex than that, but mostly codified. So looking at a move towards that, where actually then you end up with maybe fewer lawsuits and kind of bad consequences for having bad data. But it's important, it's frustrating. I mean, the other thing we have to be really honest with ourselves about is that the world is a lot more biased than a lot of us would appreciate, and things aren't equal. And so if you search for professional hairstyles on Google, you get a certain picture, and if you search for non-professional hairstyles on Google, you get a lot of people that look like me. That's because
you look like the Lord Chief Justice.
Maybe that look like me in the picture, right? You get a lot of people that look like me in the picture when I had black hair and slightly different hair. And that's because at work, I'm told, or I might be told, that my hair's not professional, and that becomes something I blog about, that becomes something I talk about. And so the association between non-professional and my image, then kind of the correlation goes up, and then that's what shows up. So that's reflecting not that Google is biased or the search engine is biased, but that actually that's the thing that happens. So I think we have to also be a lot more honest with ourselves in that life isn't fair. So you building an algorithm based off what happened before, you're only going to repeat that going forward, which still technology industry is not willing to admit that, just because you didn't build Facebook to do evil doesn't mean that it doesn't have the capacity to do it.
Yeah, I think this is very interesting. I think it's why it's interesting having somebody like Anne-Marie in the room, because if you think about those links between what you can do and ethics and law, there are all sorts of areas where, say, I don't know, what you can do with creating human embryos or embryonic research. There are rules about it. You can discuss the ethics and then you put it into rules. And I do wonder partly whether existing equality law covers some of this stuff. In terms of this is a service, this is a business, are you discriminating without thinking about it? But also if it doesn't, then how we can codify what we think is ethically important into rules that we then impose on what people do and how they do it. And then that feeds into, well, who do we need to understand doing it? But anyone else? Yes, just here and then here, please. Thank you.
So
So I guess diversifying in terms of data and that kind of thing that we're feeding into things is one thing that's quite important. But also, how do we stop kind of the diversification in the workplace being squashed? Because kind of time and time again I've seen it happen whereby people with different ideas or different ways of working are basically pushed out or kind of stopped from the promotion side of things, or kind of their ideas are just ignored because they don't do it in the way that the sort of established way of working is done. How can we kind of stop that from happening, and I guess in particular help kind of the young women coming through, because women do think very differently from men and they work very differently. So if you're a woman joining an engineering team that's predominantly all male, you're almost on a losing streak before you've started, because they don't know how to respond to you, they don't know how to kind of incorporate you in all the time. And I think it's better now than it used to be, but there is still a lot of cases of that happening despite it kind of people's opinions changing, if that makes sense.
So people think differently. I think, you know, women think differently on average or whatever, but we're not a homogeneous group, right? So there are certain types of men that think like women who also haven't been able to succeed in those, and vice versa. And that's why I say it's attract, retain and promote. So you need to have those people in leadership to be able to make those decisions. Say, actually, I like hearing the difference in what that person has said. Whereas if you've always had the same kind of person that the whole way through the organisation, then they're only going to want what they've always had. So I think it's one of those things where when you diversify, you have to do all three together. You can't just get a load of women in and say you've solved it. You can't just retain them and keep them at the same level and say you've solved it. You have to have the representation the whole way up for that to be a true change. It's more nuances though. So I don't know if there's something wholesale like that I can say to say this is how you allow diversity of thought to bubble up. I think it's more about having the right kind of person in that position of power with that sphere of influence to then say it's not okay that we have to have our meetings in the pub every Friday night.
But how do you get the people to that level if you're losing them before they can get to that level?
You need to have sponsorship and have mentorship in the right organisations. And you also need to empower those people to know that there's always an alternative organisation for them to be in. Yeah. So it's one of those things that, you know, your job as a junior female engineer is not to change that company. Your job is to do your engineering, do it really well, and find the place where you'll be celebrated to do that engineering. And new companies and new organisations happen all the time and spin up and realise that, hey, we don't want to have egg on our face when that happens, or we don't want to kill people when we put this thing out. Maybe we should have different types of people around. I think what's heartening is we have more, the more we talk about this, the more companies realise that there's something they should be doing, or the more they notice that you know, they don't have those women there, the more that they pay attention to the exit interviews, the more that things change. So it's external factors as well as internal. But I mean, I still maintain that engineering is one of those things that, or even technology, I always say on the internet, no one knows you're a dog. So you're quite fortunate actually in that there's a lot of things that you can spin up and that you can do and you can create. You don't have to be in one of those big organisations to be able to have your impact. Which arguably, maybe not, but at least within STEM, there's a great opportunity for that across all that we do.
Could you just pass the microphone back? Thank you.
Hello.
Hi. Yeah, I wanted to ask you something about what you think we should be teaching as universities. I was struck by a couple of things you said. First, very early on, you said you really liked your course here because it was very theoretical. But then a lot of what your talk was about how scientists need to be more than just techie people. They need to, you were appealing to people's idealism and altruism. You were saying we need to think about ethics and sociology. Do you think those are things that we should be bringing into undergraduate degree courses, and as a general point, but also if we did, do you think to an extent that would contribute to closing the gender gap we have in STEM recruitment and attainment?
Yes to the two different questions. So as a university or at undergrad level, what I would love to see is more. So I did a joint degree, which is the main reason why I loved it. So I could be super mathematical and go into pure maths and worlds that people don't understand unless I give them a half an hour introduction. But I also had the technical thing, and there were some technical elements of what we had practicals, for example, in all our computer science courses. So for me, I'd love to see there being a kind of cross-pollination of undergraduate degrees, where if you're doing history, there are certain computer science courses that you can take, almost like the American system, where you're able to kind of see different things and appreciate different things, and that enriches your experience. So I'd love to see that. Empirically, computer science departments that switch up their syllabus from the old school computer science syllabus and include more of the altruism earlier on and more project work earlier on, and who name their modules not for computer scientists but for human beings, tend to find that they have different types of human beings that then apply to that course and up their numbers of, if not female, not just female candidates, but candidates of minorities and different types of people on their courses. So I think part of it is in the language, should you call it Python or should you call it coding for growth, or those kinds of things. But it's also, so I think at Harvard, it's called the 500 or Edu 500, or in fact, the module did so well that it's now on a MOOC platform that anyone can go and do it. I think it's called edX 500. There's a number 500 in it somewhere. But that talks about computer science in the real world. And it's a module they do where you're able to see some of what I've spoken about actually, but saying, for all the theory you're going to do, here's some of the applications for where it's being useful, and now go and do a follow-on project around that, which kind of helps hone you and kind of keep you motivated for any of the other stuff that you've got coming up that might be too theoretical. So I definitely think we need to play with our curriculum a little bit more. But I think the cross-pollination is easier to do and just as important, which I don't think we do enough here. I think the maths department does really well on it, because you can do maths stats, maths philo, you can even do computer science and philo, but I don't know that any of the others, I think there's physics and philo here, yeah, but I don't know that anyone else has that. I think philo is the other one that I've said actually to a couple of the computer scientists a couple of times since I've left, which is that I wish we could have done more philosophy. So I've never studied philosophy in my life. I didn't go to that kind of school. And it wasn't something I'd have bet my university career on, studying something I've never done before. Whereas actually, now looking top down at what we're doing, it would have made me a better computer scientist, would have made loads of people that I know now who are working across different places better computer scientists. And at least just thinking through the logic of why are you making what you're making, which still now it's something that sometimes I'm a little bit like, okay, we've gone into this a bit much. Why don't we have other people be a part of this conversation? Why don't we have other people reason out? I don't feel morally strong enough to be able to say that that's how we should use that, and we shouldn't have that algorithm used at work, and we shouldn't have whatever it might be. If I had philosophy, maybe I would. Who knows?
We're glad you did computer science. We've got one more at the top there, and then I think I'm going to let you have a drink.
So thank you in particular for the discussion about sort of STEM and reaching out from STEM to other disciplines. And I was thinking about you've nodded to sociology and to ethics and to law. But I'm very struck by the sense that this is an industry, and the sort of contrast really between an ethics of altruism and how capitalism actually works. And so I'm wondering if can I even ask you to think about economics and sort of think about how might we ask people involved in STEM to think critically about the economy and the place of STEM industries in the economy, right? Because we live in a capitalist society which is not in fact altruistic, yeah, exactly so, yeah.
And so what's the question? Sorry, you want me to...
Yeah, so I'm just wondering, you said yes to sociology. Where would you go in terms of imagining collaborations with folks who are thinking about how economics works?
I don't know. That's almost the obvious one, I guess, economics and the STEM.
I should add I'm not an economist, so it's not a self-interested question.
Okay. I don't know. To me, that's not the jump. It's almost like STEM to sculpture is a bigger jump than STEM to economics. It's almost part and parcel. I think I don't know. I think that's the obvious one, if I could say that back.
Because these things like a step tracker, you sell them and there's advertising on the. I mean, it's based on advertising, or how do you make money out of it, or get somebody else to fund it because it's a good thing?
But my thing for improving how you make money out of it is you need to think about the ethics, and you need to think about what you're creating and why you're creating it, not the economic value of what you're building, if that makes sense. So that's why I wouldn't tie that to economics. I'd still tie that back to the philosophical reason why. Why do we need a tool that compares women on campus? Like that, to me, that's the question. Because the economic thing at the end, I mean, ultimately, if you're creating anything of value, someone will pay for it. Someone, even if it's not a market paying for it, even if it's not a business model, there's someone that will pay for it if it's of value. I saw Bill Gates this morning. Spent something like 20 billion over the last 10 years on global health. I mean, that's not. There's no economics in that, but someone's paid for. He's the person that's paid for those advances to happen, and we've seen health increase and poverty reduce. So someone will pay for it. So to me, I don't know if I want computer scientists to study economics more. I don't know if that didn't feel like the right answer, but that is the answer I'm going to say now. I don't have all the answers is the other thing. So maybe I should just say I don't know. Yeah, I'll think about it. Maybe I'll get back to you. But I don't know. There's something about, I don't know, because it's the system. It's the way the system works. It's the way the money flows. Does a computer scientist need? Obviously there will be problems that computer scientists can solve. But would that be? Well, maybe that's it. Maybe they can think about it.
We do have an economist at the Institute for the Future of Work.
We do have one that's doing it.
He talks to Anne-Marie, she explains things to him, he explains things to her.
Christopher and I work it out together.
Yeah.
I mean, the funny side, so the example or the thing that does come to mind is something like Bitcoin, which is threatening to change economies and change things so much that... is this bit still being recorded?
I don't know.
Where's Greg gone? It is.
Right.
So it's changing things. It's changing things so much that certain governments don't want to invest in Bitcoin because they're so afraid at the force that it might have and the capacity it has to kind of undermine entire economies because it's a currency that's not tied to their typical structures of things, which is disruption, right? So, I mean, maybe it's a computer scientist. There's something there, and that computer scientist, he built it with the currency in mind, but now we're seeing the blockchain has applications everywhere else because it's a ledger, right? So there's, I don't know. If we get the computer scientists to be more ethical, maybe we can unleash a couple of economies on them. But as things are now, we're already risking lives as it is with killer robots. I don't know if economy would be the main thing I'd want them to go after. We have other problems to solve. So that's what I want computer scientists to do, to look for other problems that are genuine, like the SDGs, for example, like look at real problems that people have and go and solve those. Don't build apps for your apps, or build Terminator because the film was cool.
Okay.
Sorry.
No,
Great note to end on.
Yeah. No, thank you very much, Anne-Marie. It was a very interesting talk. Thank you very much for starting off our term in such an interesting way. Next week, the speaker is Robin Gorner, who was until recently the chief executive of an organisation called She Decides, used to work for the World Health Organization on women and girls' health, and is interested in autonomy and women's bodies and health. I was also very interested in what Anne-Marie said about STEAM and recognising the important role of technology and creativity. On the 16th of February, we have Mike McGee, who's the creative director of Framestore, which has done the effects for almost any film you've ever seen. So if you're interested in technology and Hollywood, come along to that. If you want to sign up for our talks, there is a list at the back, and we can email you what they are, and you can turn up when you want to, or there's a little leaflet for this term. But we really appreciate you coming, and thank you very much, Anne-Marie, for a fantastic talk.